This video is sponsored by War Stories V-Mail. If you picture a US Navy fighter from World War II, it's likely you either think of one of the Grumman Cats or the gull-winged Corsair. While the F4F and F6F saw their last frontline naval operations in the waning days of the Pacific War, the Corsair was just getting started with its career. Even as jets began to take over the carrier decks in the 1950s, the venerable Corsairs wouldn't go quietly into the night. Not only would it become a vital close air support asset, it would be a Corsair pilot that would become the Korean War's only Navy ace. Sit down, get your kneeboards out, and take some notes, guys. We're going over the Navy's first strike fighter, the Corsair. July 1953, the skies of North Korea. A lone F4U 5N night fighter of Composite Squadron 3 howled through the night, its supercharged R-2800 engine shattering the serene calm of the summer air. At the helm was Lieutenant Guy Bordelon, a 30-year-old naval aviator who already claimed 4 other communist aircraft. He searched not with just his eyes, but through a crude radar scope in his cockpit. Through the orange cathode ray tube screen, he could make out a long blip, painted by the bulbous APS-19A radar set in the starboard wing. Guiding himself to the radar contact, all it took was a swift burst out of the 4 20mm cannons in the Corsair, and Bordelon became the first and only Navy ace of the Korean War. Bordelon's victory was only the latest highlight in an extensive career for the gull-winged fighter, its legacy spanning back to the days leading up to World War II. The Corsair's origins lay in the need for a replacement for the aging biplane fighters of the 1930s. The US Navy wanted proposals for a new fighter, be it single or twin-engined. The main philosophy behind one of the applicants, the Vought Aircraft Corporation, was pure speed. Chief designer Rex Beisel made it firm to his team of 90 engineers the concept that speed is king and there would be no compromising. In April 1938, Vought prepared 2 designs for the US Navy under Beisel's guidance. The first, dubbed V166A by the company, aka Vought A, was powered by the R-1830. The other, Vought B, was built around the new Pratt & Whitney R-2800 Double Wasp radial engine. The Double Wasp was an extremely powerful engine for the day, but it was big, prompting the designers to employ an inverted gull wing to allow the massive 14-foot propeller to clear the deck. Vought B was seen as much more favorable in the eyes of the Navy and was ordered into development. But real quick, ad time. If you're interested in World War II history, I have an awesome product to show you. Today's sponsor, War Stories V-Mail, is a new subscription service based around shipping personal stories of World War II to your front door. Wars are not won by numbers or lines on a map, they're won by individuals working together for a common goal. War Stories takes real accounts from those who were there, and melds them together with supporting articles like maps, documents, and photos to create a better picture of the veteran in question. War Stories V-Mail is run by an actual World War II museum, so you know you're going to get some historical accuracy here. All of the proceeds from War Stories V-Mail go directly to the Eldred World War II Museum, which is a non-profit organization aiming to tell the story of the Second World War to the next generation. The subscription service has 3 options. If you'd like to test the waters, you can subscribe for just 1 month. For those looking for a few stories, they also have a 6-month option. And finally, for the hardcore historian looking to experience different facets of the war from a dozen tales, you can subscribe for a whole year. Go to warstoriesvmail.com today to subscribe. Not only will you receive an awesome piece of history every month, it'll support a great cause. Now, back to the Corsair. From the get-go, the XF4U was envisioned as a Navy fighter that could also take on the attack role. The Vought B, designated XF4U-1 by the Navy, had a dual purpose for its squat and robust landing gear. Takeoff and landing aside, the main landing gear could be extended to act as an ad hoc air brake to facilitate ground attack. Another unique feature of the prototype were a pair of cooling tanks embedded in the wings. These provided cooling for the oil system in the R-2800 supercharger interstage. In certain flight profiles like high-speed dives, the intakes created a distinct whine or high-pitched whistling sound. Flush riveting was another innovation that lent itself to the new plane's speed. The new riveting cut down on drag and gave the XF4U's outer skin a smoother surface than previous fighter aircraft. But what's a fighter without teeth? Initially, the XF4U was to be equipped with 2 30-caliber machine guns in the engine cowling, but this number was increased to 350s and a single 30 cal upon Vought's reception of combat data from Europe when World War II kicked off. On May 29, 1940, the first XF4U took off on its maiden flight. During testing, the XF4U was the first aircraft to rip past 400 miles an hour, even with a full complement of gun ammunition. The fighter's performance was so outstanding that it even caught the eye of the Army Air Corps, as interest was expressed by General Hap Arnold. Even though we never would see the Army Air Corps adopt it, the inter-service excitement for the XF4U prompted an initial production order from the Navy for 584 airplanes. Vought dubbed the new fighter in honor of their earlier scout plane, the Corsair. The newly dubbed Corsair was gradually redesigned into the production model, the F4U-1. The F4U's armament was increased from 4 machine guns to 6 50 calibers in the wings. More than enough firepower to chew up any aircraft the Corsair would run into. An interesting feature of the Corsair that we take for granted now is the inclusion of a master arm which acted as a safety mechanism for all weapons carried. Now, this is a feature seen today on almost all tactical fighter aircraft. The new Corsair soon found its way into Navy squadrons and began carrier trials in October 1942. Commander Sam Porter tested the feasibility of operating the Navy's bent wing fighter from the deck of the escort carrier USS Sangamon, steaming in the Chesapeake Bay. Issues with the new fighter immediately became apparent as the nose of the aircraft made visibility nigh impossible on approach to the boat. The lack of visibility also made it hard to see the landing signal officer, exacerbating problems. Porter did eventually get the Corsair to touch down on the Sangamon, but the shock absorbers called oleos in the landing gear bottomed out and telescoped back violently, bouncing the plane back into the sky. Had other aircraft been parked on the bow of the ship, Porter would have likely collided with them and been killed. Porter also discovered that quick power changes on a slow approach would cause the engine torque to violently roll the aircraft, which may cause a less experienced pilot to flip the Corsair into the drink. It was a rough start, and the Navy shelved the Corsair from becoming queen of the carrier deck. In the meantime, Corsair squadrons were relegated to shore-based operations, with a large number of the aircraft being transferred to the Marine Corps squadrons such as VMF-214, later known as the Black Sheep. 2 Navy squadrons, VF-12 and VF-17, continued to tackle the issues plaguing the Corsair's carrier readiness alongside Vought engineers. They found at low speeds the massive propeller of the plane spun an invisible spiral of air across flight surfaces. The disrupted air would force the left wing into a stall first, which was then made worse by the prop torque. To remedy the situation, a stall strip was fitted to the right wing. The early strips, fashioned by simple 6-inch blocks of wood, made the right wing stall alongside the left one should the Corsair find itself nearing a departure. This reduced the port stall tendency. By now, the Corsair was being manufactured not just by Vought, but also Brewster and Goodyear. Yeah, the tire company made fighter planes. New Corsairs coming off the assembly line were fitted with refined stall strips, and while the issue never fully went away, it was a huge step in improving the fighter's carrier landing tendencies. Another vast improvement came with the F4U-1D and its bubble canopy. The bubble canopy offered a better view around the aircraft, and the seat was raised 8 inches to improve view over the nose. The landing gear struts were improved as well. Tweaks to the oleos in the struts made for a less bouncy impact on the deck. Even so, the Corsair was far from an easy bird to land. It would be up to the Navy to develop new landing patterns to bring the bent wing bird aboard. By June 1943, the British Fleet Air Arm had begun operating their own Corsairs from their carriers, albeit with a few modifications of their own. Having received the older F4U-1 variant, redubbed Corsair Mark II, the British trimmed the edges of their wings to fit into lower hangar spaces, wired the top cowling flaps shut, and employed their own version of a canopy similar to the Malcolm hood seen on Seafires. As the common version of the story goes, their angled approaches adapted from the Seafire use allowed the Corsair pilot to see the LSO almost all the way through the landing groove. The US Navy soon adopted their own version of an angled approach, so most historians jumped to the conclusion that the Royal Navy solved the Corsair landing problem. And honestly, I was going to leave it at that until I dug a little deeper into how the US Navy continued Corsair carrier trials. You see, while the majority of US Corsairs were striking from Pacific Islands in early 1943, back in the States on the Great Lakes, the Navy was still hard at work trying to come up with their own solutions. USS Wolverine, a carrier modified from a paddle steamer, was used extensively to modify landing patterns and such to find a consistent method of recovering Corsairs. An April 1943 document from Carrier Qualification Unit Glenview stated that, after testing refined carrier approaches, the F4U airplane is an excellent carrier type and very easy to land aboard. In fact, curved approaches were already standard operating procedures for both navies prior to World War II. From what I can parse, the landing circuit was merely refined for Corsair operations. The landing patterns differed between the US Navy and the Fleet Air Arm as well. British pilots had 15-second break intervals when going into the pattern, and test pilot Winkle Brown suggested crabbing the plane on final to allow for better line of sight. Crabbing is effectively putting the plane into a side slip so the nose is offset from the aircraft's direction of travel. American patterns were spaced up to 30-second break intervals and followed a more gradual curve onto the deck. Now that being said, when at the fleet, air groups might have their own minor variations of how they landed the Corsair, but the solution to the landing issue wasn't as simple as the British fixed it and the US Navy merely adopted their techniques. And this isn't meant to bash the British by any means. Even though the US Navy found their own solutions several months before the Fleet Air Arm actively flew the Corsair, the Brits were definitely flying their Corsair variants en masse from the boat before the US redeployed them to carriers. If anything, both navies discovered very similar solutions to a mutual problem. And by all means, if anyone has concrete information to the contrary, please comment below. In my scouring of the internet, I've also read the suggestion that the Corsair was late to the carrier deck due to the Navy's desire to simplify the logistics for their Grumman aircraft fleet. But again, I'd love to find some hard documents on the subject. In any case, by 1944, the Allies were flying the Corsair from their carriers with great success. By war's end, British Corsairs scored 47 enemy air-to-air kills against the Japanese, and even used them in the European theater, though they didn't encounter any Luftwaffe aircraft. American Corsairs claimed 2,140 air combat victories against 189 losses to the enemy fighters, for an astounding kill ratio of over 11-1. The Corsair wasn't just a fighter either. It saw great success as a ground attack platform, performing strike missions, close air support, and even maritime attack. During the Battle of Leyte Gulf, Marine Squadrons VMF-211, VMF-218, and VMF-313 successfully attacked a Japanese convoy, sending Tasmania Maru and Mino Maru to the bottom. Another notable maritime strike was conducted by Lieutenant Robert Hampton Gray, a Canadian pilot flying with the Royal Navy. On August 9, 1945, he sunk the Japanese destroyer Honshu. His actions that day earned him the Victoria Cross. The Corsair would continue serving the US Navy and Marines post-World War II to great effect. When the Korean War kicked off in 1950, Corsair supported UN ground forces across the peninsula and even had great success against communist piston-engine fighters. As jets like the MiG-15 came into the mix, however, the World War II vintage Corsair was quickly outclassed, and it was soon relegated to strike missions exclusively. Even so, on September 10, 1952, Marine Captain Jesse Fulmar, flying a Corsair from VMA 312, took on a flight of MiGs that jumped him and his wingman Walter Daniels. Spotting the MiGs diving on them, Fulmar jettisoned his payload and turned the Corsair to meet the oncoming threat. The one advantage the Corsair had over the faster MiG was its tight turning capability. As Fulmar and Daniels performed a defensive weave, the lead MiG overshot the Americans. Fulmar snapped back and was able to get a 5-second burst off from his 20mm cannons. The cannon rounds tore into the MiG, setting it ablaze and prompting the pilot to eject. Fulmar wasn't out of the woods yet, for another MiG landed a volley of hits on his left wing. Luckily, the Corsair was resilient enough to stay aloft despite missing 4 feet of wing. Knowing he wouldn't make it back to base, Fulmar bailed out and was swiftly rescued by an SA-16 Albatross flying boat. Victories like Fulmar's and Bordelon's night fighter kills further cemented the Corsair into the annals of naval history. While the US military retired the Corsair for good in 1953, its story didn't end there. In the early 1950s, the F4U was developed for use by the French Navy. With an improved R2800 engine and 4 20mm cannons, the 7's most advanced weapon was the French SS-11 air-to-surface missile. The SS-11 was a manual command-to-line-of-sight guided missile which required the pilot to steer the missile into the target. Not gonna lie, it was a hell of an advanced tool to be added to a fighter designed in the 30s. French Corsairs fought in Indochina, Algeria, and the Suez conflict, and were only retired as late as 1964. And that wasn't even the last time the Corsair drew blood. As late as 1969, F4Us were in the hands of the Honduran Air Force during the football war against El Salvador. Captain Fernando Soto of the Honduran Air Force shot down 3 Salvadoran Air Force aircraft in a single day on 17 July 1969. The first victory was against a Cavalier Mustang, which was a post-World War II modification of the classic P-51. Later, Soto encountered a pair of Goodyear-built FG-1 Corsairs, both of which he splashed. These engagements would mark the last pure piston air combat victories in history, and the Corsairs would finally be retired from service in 1979. In the end, from 1942 to 1953, over 12,500 of the type were manufactured and used across the globe. To say the Corsair is an icon of military history is an absolute understatement, and it really did do it all. The legacy of the Corsair would continue on in the form of Vaught's A7 Corsair II, but I think that's a story for another time. Thanks for watching, everyone, and once again, I want to remind you to check out War Stories V-Mail. It's an awesome project to keep the legacies of World War II veterans alive, and it supports an awesome museum. If you're interested in helping me out, please like the video and subscribe. I also have a Patreon if you're interested in helping line my wallet. And on that note, let's see that list of Ace of Aces to your patrons. Special thanks to Captain Fantastic, Deuce, Ghoul, Iron, Jake Fuentes, Kodai, Private Petey, Aspen, Weefy, Boats FG, Strider1, Fox 2, and Caleb Corey. Keep that sun at your back now. Have a good one.